We're going to be breaking down vendor take-back mortgages today. Now, Kyle is the expert in the field of vendor take-back mortgages. To date, he's actually done over $10 million in vendor take-back negotiations. Let's start from the first one here, the Huron lot in Grand Bend. So you negotiated a price of $200K and the vendor take-back term was $200K. So you got 100% VTB. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so this was a deal where we were actually buying two properties from the seller at the same time. They were originally asking $300,000 for this lot. We were able to negotiate them down to $200,000. So we purchased the property for $200,000. They lent us $200,000. So the way that works now, for the next 18 months, we're simply making a 6% interest payment on the $200,000. We make that payment monthly. And that's a fully open mortgage.
Absolutely wild, just 100% vendor take-back mortgage. Now, as you can see from all of the deals, they're quite similar. You actually have another 100% one, which we'll get to shortly. What's going on YouTube? It's Rebecca Lynn Matheson here. Welcome to the Cottage Corner. Today I'm joined by Kyle Ford. Welcome to the Cottage Corner. We're going to be breaking down vendor take-back mortgages today. Now, Kyle is the expert in the field of vendor take-back mortgages. To date, he's actually done over $10 million in vendor take-back negotiations. So welcome to the Cottage Corner, Kyle.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. We're going to get started by breaking down exactly what a vendor take-back mortgage is. So, without further ado, we're going to go beyond the 10 million into our breakdown here. So, Kyle, why don't you start us off? What exactly is a vendor take-back?
Well, let's start with a traditional mortgage. A traditional mortgage, we're going to take our down payment, we're going to go to our bank or traditional lending institution, and they're going to give us the rest of the money we need. So what a vendor take-back mortgage is the vendor is the seller of the property. So instead of going to the bank to get that money, we're going to go to the seller of the property and ask them to hold financing for us. So that's high level what a VTB is.
Got it. Okay. Now, specifically, how does that work? So the seller's holding on to that money and they're basically acting like the bank. So how does that actually work?
Yeah. So it can be a little bit awkward at first to say, hey, I'm going to buy your property, but I want you to lend me back the money. But there can be a lot of advantages to people, including tax advantages, monthly interest payments, and sometimes people aren't, the number one thing they're looking for isn't the highest price. They're looking for terms. So how does it work? First of all, on every single transaction I do, the reason I got to that $10 million number, every single transaction I always ask if the seller is willing to hold some type of financing. If they're willing to hold financing, I might be willing to pay a little bit higher price for the property. So from there, once we've got the seller on board with it, we make a written offer, they have it reviewed by their lawyer, and on closing, when I take title of the property, the seller is going to have a mortgage position registered on the property.
Got it. Okay. That really makes sense. So it's either the price or the terms that we're going for, and the vendor take back allows for you to give potentially a better price because the terms are so strong.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Yep. So then pros and cons. So both from the seller side and from the buyer side, what are the pros, and then we'll dive into the cons.
Yeah. So from the seller side, I'll start with the con, which is they're not getting their money right away.
Right.
So generally when somebody sells a property, they're going to get all the proceeds from the sale. So a con would be they're not getting all their money right away. The pros to that could be if it's a secondary property, like for example a cottage, they might have some taxes owed on the sale. By doing a vendor take-back mortgage, they can defer their taxes for up to 5 years.
Okay.
One tip that I like to give on this is recommend in your offer that they talk to their accountant about the pros of a vendor take-back mortgage. One thing I've done a couple times now is I offer to pay for that review. I'll pay 1 hour of your accountant's time to look over my offer and explain to you the benefit of why you might want to do a vendor take-back. The great thing about that is the accountant can sell the deal for you. So from the buyer's perspective, pros and cons, the number one pro is we're not qualifying. We're not getting our credit pulled. We're not producing income documents. It's not about our debt service ratios. It's about the deal. And does the buyer know, like, and trust, or sorry, does the seller know, like, and trust you? Are they willing to lend you the financing? That can sometimes be enough. Some of the cons, I'm generally paying a little bit higher rate than you would through an A-rate bank. In today's times, you can get an interest rate under 2% if you qualify.
Yep.
So most of my VTB terms are around the 4 to 6% range. So paying a little bit higher rate, but the terms are worth it for me. Sometimes I'm also could be paying a little bit higher price for the property. But as long as my numbers make sense and that's built into my model, I don't mind paying a little bit higher price if I'm getting the terms I like.
That makes sense. So again, we're back to the price and terms in any real estate negotiation. That's what we're looking at. And from both the seller and the buyer's perspective, there are certainly pros and cons. And I really like that tip about going to the accountant and having that numbers breakdown for the seller to actually understand the full benefits for them in that negotiation. So last one is just, how do you actually set one up?
Yeah, so one tip I'll give around this, how do I set one up, is sometimes you need to get the realtor out of the way. And I mean that with the utmost respect. Realtors are worth their weight in gold and they can be a great person involved in the negotiation, but sometimes they don't understand what a VTB is. So if the realtor understands, great, have the realtor explain it. In my experience, I like to get the offer in front of the seller's lawyer and accountant. They generally have a better idea of how this stuff works. The actual setup is done the same way your mortgages traditionally close. You're going to go to the lawyer's going to be instructed, and on closing, instead of going to get the funds from a bank, the lawyer is just going to change title, and whatever the VTB amount is, they're going to register that back. So don't get too caught up in the nitty gritty. If you can negotiate the deal and get the seller on board with it, the lawyer is going to take care of this on closing.
Got it. Now, what are the ramifications or things that can happen? Like, what happens if you set up a negotiation and it goes wrong, as in the buyer is now unable to fulfill the commitments of the vendor take-back? What kind of fail-safes are there for the seller?
So the seller is the bank. So just like if you can't make your payments to the bank, the seller is going to be secured in first or second position, depending on what you negotiated, and they have the same rights that a bank does. They have to issue a notice, they have to put you into power of sale, and eventually if you're unable to get caught up, they're able to force the sale of the property to either recoup their investment, or they could buy the property or take the property back from you. So they're, once again, from a pro's perspective for the seller, they've secured their money against a property they already know. So, but they have the same security as a bank would.
Got it. So if things went wrong in that transaction, the seller is safeguarded by the property. So they would actually get that property back if things went south.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So very interesting terms and conditions that you can negotiate here in a vendor take-back. Now we're actually going to break down some examples of Kyle's vendor take-back negotiations. So we've actually done 4 that we're going to break down. So let's just go right into that. So let's start from the first one here at the Huron lot in Grand Bend. So you negotiated a price of $200K and the vendor take-back term was $200K. So you got 100% VTB. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so this was a deal where we were actually buying 2 properties from the seller at the same time. The one property was a livable cottage that we bought under more conditional terms, and they wanted to sell them both at the same time. They were originally asking $300,000 for this lot. we were able to negotiate them down to $200,000, which is significantly below market value. And because we had negotiated cash terms of the other property we were buying, we negotiated 100% vendor take back on this. So we purchased the property for $200,000. They lent us $200,000. So the way that works now is we're going to be developing that property into a new construction home. For the next 18 months, we're simply making a 6% interest payment on the $200,000. We make that payment monthly, and that's a fully open mortgage. So when we get our construction financing for our development house, we will either keep this and get the construction financing in second, or maybe have the construction financing pay this out early. We'll play that by ear when the development starts.
Absolutely wild, just 100% vendor take back mortgage. Now, as you can see from all of the deals, they're quite similar. You actually have another 100% one, which we'll get to shortly, but let's dive into Mallory Beach in Wyerton. So that one you purchased for $325K, and you had a 90% vendor take back on that. So let's break that deal down as well.
Yeah, so this was one of the first properties I ever purchased. I negotiated the price of $325. They were asking $330, so I was able to get them down just a little bit, and a 90% vendor take back. A cool story about this property is one thing that I do in my investment business is I tell everybody that my name's Kyle, I buy properties in any condition, and I can close cash.
Yep.
So that's a marketing thing that I do. So that's how this gentleman was introduced to me. So I was up at the cottage and looking it over, and he's like, I want $330. If you give me $325, we can make a deal today. And I said, okay, great. Would you consider lending me $325,000? He goes, well, I thought you closed cash. I can close cash, but if you're interested, I understand that you might have some tax issues on this property. You've owned it for a long time. If you were to lend me back that money and I would pay you an interest rate, not only would you get monthly income, but you'd also save some money on taxes. Why don't you talk to your accountant? And he kind of shook his head and said, not really interested. Until the next morning. Called me back and he said his accountant thought it was a great idea. So that deal was done at 3.99, 5-year term, 30-year amortization. A cool thing about that one, going back to VTB terms, if you go to the bank and you're looking to buy a secondary residence, you're generally looking at 20% down. And you need to be able to verify that down payment. Because the VTB, we did it at 10% down, there was no credit check, there was no income verification, and I pulled this 10% off a line of credit. So there was no debt service ratios that needed to be factored in. I pulled it off the line of credit, closed like that. Yep. No other due diligence or anything like that. So
amazing. So you were able to really move quickly on that deal as well. And again, going back to the accountant, make friends with your accountant and understand the full terms so that you can best communicate that when you're actually negotiating these deals. And I really love that you made that recommendation to the seller because they were quickly able to actually understand the full terms of it.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Okay, next deal here we have Stokes Bay in Lions Head. Now this was a purchase price of $650, and again another 100% vendor take back.
Yeah. So ironically enough, this deal's closing today as we're filming this deal. So it's I got my notification from the lawyer a minute ago that everything's going through. Yep. This one, so I mentioned in the other one we were buying another property cash, which made it a little bit easier to get the 100% VTB. With this one, there was no other purchases involved. We negotiated this, and throughout the negotiation, they were looking to have me put money down, but based on this specific deal, I really didn't want to put any cash down. Anytime you put money down, it affects your return on investment. If you're not putting any money down, your return on investment is infinite, and those are my favorite returns. Yep. So we negotiate. Now, what I will say on this deal is I didn't get a deal at this price. This is full market value for the property, and as an investor, I like to make money on the buy, but I paid full market value for this property today because I didn't have to put any money down. Yeah. So that gives me the ability to have a great return. As you can see, 4% interest for 5 years, and that property has amazing potential. This is an example of this seller probably maybe could have got a little bit more on the market, but they did not want cash. They wanted a VTB. They're a pretty large scale investor. They've sold off a lot of properties in the last couple of years and they have a ton of tax issues. They wanted the vendor take back. So we're so used to hearing that everybody wants the best price. Everybody wants the best price, and probably 90% of sellers want the best price. Yep. But there's a section of the market that doesn't necessarily want the best price, and that could be your VTB clients.
Absolutely. So it all goes back to price and terms. Again, price and terms. It's so essential that we're taking the full scope of the seller's why into consideration, and this is a perfect example of that, where Kyle, you were able to actually understand what and why the investor wanted to sell so that you could actually negotiate a deal that serviced both of you, because they wanted to really basically understand the full scope of the property and the deal, and not have to pay those capital gains taxes right away. So it allowed you to actually get into a position where you could put zero money down and have a huge win on a deal, and they also have a huge win as well.
That's right.
Awesome. Last deal that we're going to break down here is Pine Street in Grand Bend, and this is a purchase price of $1.15 million. This is the golden $1 million vendor take back at around 87%. So if you want to break that down now, if you want to see the full breakdown of this video, refer back to Matt McKeever's channel, where you actually broke down this deal and all of the specifics of this $1 million VTB. So welcome to our cottage in Grand Bend.
Just purchased about 6 months ago for $1.15 million, and we are tearing it down. 2 doors down, has a helicopter pad on the roof. Guys. So if the neighbor two doors down was able to get a helicopter pad on their roof, we're pretty confident in our ability to get permits for what we're looking to do. Yeah. What we did was we went with a double offer strategy.
That is genius. I've never heard of someone doing that.
So why don't you just give us a high-level overview of what happened in this deal?
Yeah, so this was another example, and please refer back to the video. The numbers were more fresh in my mind. It's a couple years since we closed this one. But we did a double offer. So in this one, we had 2 offers, and we went to the realtor that we were working with was, first of all, fantastic. He understood VTBs very in depth. He took the time to talk to the selling realtor. The selling realtor also understood VTBs, and we happen to know a little bit about the sellers. We happen to know that they were, a fairly affluent family. The property was not their primary residence; it was a secondary property, and that they didn't need to sell because they needed the money. They just didn't want the maintenance anymore. Got it. So these were some key indicators that said these people might be interested in a VTB. So we had 2 offers, and like I said, please refer back for the exact numbers. But the one offer was $100,000 more in price. Mm-hmm. With a VTB, or $100,000 less in cash. Got it. So I was willing to pay an extra $100,000 to have a vendor take back mortgage. And just to put it into perspective where that came from, private lending rates are generally around 10%. Right. So if we're talking $1 million, 10% is $100,000. Yep. So after 3 years, I'm coming out quite a bit ahead by getting a VTB at 3.99 versus paying private money rates at 10%. So this property, we're now a couple years later. I've had an offer for this property that is almost 3 times what I paid for it. I'm not selling this property. I joke that I have a pretty substantial portfolio and everything is for sale except for that. Yep. So I'm not selling it. It's one of the most unique properties here in Grand Bend. Yep. And though it was tempting and interesting to hear that number, it's not for sale. So we're doing a development on that where we're building a very large luxurious home where it's hoping to be a multi-generational home, so my mom and sister can be living there as well. So that's the plan.
Now that would be a return on your investment right there. That's but right. It sounds like that property really has a soft spot in your heart, and sometimes, again, the price point isn't worth it when you have that kind of goal from the property. So that is a fantastic outcome on that deal. Yep. And on all of these deals, you can absolutely negotiate vendor takebacks and have it be a win-win for all parties. And these deals are a perfect example of that, where you've gone gone in, understood the seller's why, and also serviced your goals along the way. So thank you, Kyle, for joining us today on Cottage Corner, where we break down vendor take-back mortgages. Again, you can refer back to Matt McKeever's channel earlier with this $1 million VTB for more specific breakdown on the numbers, and also hop over to my channel, Rebecca Lynn Matheson, for some deep dives into a couple of these deals. We're going to go into Mallory Beach in Wyerton, as well as this Stokes Bay in Lionhead development project. So make sure you tune in for those as well. If you're looking for off-market cottage deals, the best place to find them is www.cottagebuyers.com/private deals, where you will find an email list subscription that you can sign up to and receive all of the best off-market cottage deals, where we will negotiate the deals, and we might even be able to negotiate some vendor takebacks along the way. Thanks for joining us, guys, and thank you, Kyle, for joining me on today's episode of Cottage Corner.